Okay, hi everyone. I can see we've got a couple people in and a couple still joining, so we'll just give it a couple seconds for everyone to join. So welcome everyone and everyone who's just joining as well. We're just going to give it maybe 1 more minute just to allow everyone to get ready. Okay, so it seems like we've got quite a healthy audience at the moment. So I'll just introduce myself. So hello everyone, my name is Amber Jarrett and I will be your host for today. We've got a very exciting webinar in partnership between SiSTEM and BNA. So we'll get on to a bit about both of them. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, our numbers are looking good. Just a brief introduction about me. My name's Amber Jarrett, as I've just mentioned, and I have a platform called Jarrett et al, where I just teach everything we weren't taught in school. So this ranges from like sort of interview tips that have got me offers at FANG companies all the way through to how to start saving for a car, for example. So it's a big range of content there. And then just on our next slide, we're just going to start with our icebreaker whilst everyone's just getting comfortable and getting ready. So just a couple of questions, and if everyone can answer in the Q&A box, that would be great. Or you can use the chat box. That should be fine, I think, for this bit. So if we could just get some information on where is everyone based right now? So what area is everyone in, just to get an idea? So I'm just trying to see the comments. Not sure. Danny, are you able to see the comments? I can't. Okay, right, I can see them. So wow. Okay, God, we've got Toronto, Canada. We've got Norwich. This is good. Keep them coming in. Okay, I've got another question for everyone. What sort of stage is everyone at? Have we got students in here? Are people working? Have they just started a grad job? And if so, regardless of whatever stage you're at, what are you studying if you're a student? What job are you currently in? What are you looking to get into? Just to get an idea of who we've got. So we've got early career doing a career change. That's good. It'll be nice to know sort of what you're currently doing or what you're looking to get into. And then also it'd be interesting to know what people are looking to get out today. What was it that made you sign up for it? And what would have you leaving here today saying, yeah, this was a great webinar. All my questions are answered. What sort of things are people looking to get out today? Okay, so what we're going to do is just on the next slide, I'm just going to give you a brief introduction to SiSTEM, and I'm going to hand over to our co-founders. So SiSTEM is a platform which is designed to inspire, connect, and educate women about STEM, hence the topic today. And we have our founders, which are Donna and Abigail. As we can see, I'm just going to hand over to them, who's just going to give you a brief introduction about the background of SiSTEM.
Hello, everyone. Hi. Thank you all for joining. I am Dr. Abigail, and this is Donna. Yes, and we are SiSTEM. We are two sisters who founded this initiative. First of all, my background, I am, biomedical science. I've basically done biomedical science from my undergrad. I then did a neuroscience master's, and then I've now gone on to do a PhD in biomedical science, specifically in aging. And since graduating from my PhD, I have now moved into medical communications. So yeah, I've done quite a bit. I've gone into clinical research before my PhD. But as I said, my background is biomedical science. And we have my sister here.
Hi, everyone. As I said, I'm Donna, and I am a mechanical engineer by trade, but currently I'm working in digital communications. For my undergrad, I did mechanical engineering. For my master's, I did advanced mechanical engineering. And yeah, as I said, right now I'm working in digital communications at the Royal Academy of Engineering. So I'm an engineer that loves marketing.
And yeah, as we said, we're two sisters, but we both went through, I'll say, the same struggles, especially as minorities, as Black women in STEM. And during our struggles, we had each other to support and tell each other that yes, you can go on, you can do this. And once we came out of it, we realized that there was no way that we would have even completed our courses or even gone as far as we have if we didn't have that support. And we realized that not everyone is privileged or blessed to have that support. So we created SiSTEM, where we basically extend that support to other women. We launched last year, and since our launch, basically our aim is to connect other women with each other and extend that to other ladies. Donna will explain more about what we do.
Yeah, so as Abigail said, our aim was to connect other women. We also want to create a space for women so that you are able to feel, in a sense, comfortable, as we felt that in our own industries, we were always the minority and we didn't always feel comfortable to be who we were. So we created SiSTEM so that everyone will have that community of women going through similar struggles. So a place where that you are able to vent and talk about, maybe if you had a bad day at work, you are able to vent and tell us. And if you ever wanted advice, someone in the community would be able to give you that advice so that you're able to grow. And we just want to see women in STEM grow because, as you said, that sisterhood really did help us through our degrees. And we just want to extend that hand out to other women in STEM.
Yes, and also some of the things that we've been doing so far is we are on Instagram, we are on LinkedIn, we are on YouTube. We are trying to change the narrative of what STEM is and what STEM women look like. So we're trying to increase STEM representation by featuring a lot of Black women in STEM on our page. So yes, if you would like to follow us, just on Instagram or anything, follow us for that. And then also, we're just passionate about inspiring the next generation as well. So we do events like university events and also go into schools to visit and also encourage girls at the very early stage of their career and also at the end of their careers.
And what we also love to do is educate people on the different types of careers that you can do in STEM. I am like a personal testimony of this. I did not know that I could get into marketing using my engineering degree, and just being able to inspire other young women to get into engineering. I didn't think that was a job, but through SiSTEM and talking to other people, I learned that that's a route that I can take, and science communication is a career. So we hope that today that we are able to inspire you to look into different types of careers, because a lot of people think that once you do your career, there's one straight route that you need to go down. But today we're here to tell you that that is not the truth.
Yeah. And then lastly, we do have a newsletter. So if you want to scan the QR code to be part of our mailing list, where we do keep you up to date with all the events, such as like this webinar that we're having today and other similar, even in-person events. Also just keeping up to date with, some of like the features and things that we have on our page, and some opportunities and like internships and other programs that we may have. We do also offer an internship program for university students and graduates who just want to who feel passionate about STEM, just women in STEM like us, and would like to put their hand in like creativity and also sharing the passion with us. So we're going to hand over now to Amber, and we just really hope that you enjoy this webinar.
Perfect. Thank you, ladies. So yeah, these are our fantastic co-founders and a bit about them. Now just moving on to BNA, which stands for the British Neuroscience Association. So this is where the two have merged together. So the BNA is a society that supports and promotes neuroscience across the UK. So it's the largest UK organization representing all areas of research into the nervous system. So the purpose of today's webinar is actually talking about the science administration sectors, learning more about science administration as a career, and learning from the panelists' career journey. So I did see someone mention in the chat that they're going back to school to study biology or something, and they just wanted to get things from get insight from different people's perspective. And this just leads me on to our housekeeping rules for today, guys. If you have anything that you'd like to share or to mention, then please use the Q&A function, and we can actually see those, and then we'll respond to, and there'll be time to ask questions mainly at the end of today's session. So moving on to our panelists, we have 3 panelists today, starting with Dr. Anne Cook. So Dr. Cook is the Chief Executive of the BNA. She started her career as a research scientist and went on to launch Bristol Neuroscience, which is the first of the city neuroscience schemes across the UK. She has continued in research management / science administration ever since, working for the Bristol Heart Institute and the British Anaesthetic and Respiratory Equipment Manufacturers Association. That's a big mouthful, Dr. Anne, and now the BNA, of course. So we will be hearing more about her journey to Chief Executive and what a Chief Executive role looks like during this webinar. Then we have Dr. Bernie Simone, and Dr. Bernie Simone Owusu-Young. And she is a postdoctoral research fellow at UCL, Institute for Women's Health, and her research focuses on developing novel gene therapies to treat neurological diseases, which she obtained her PhD at UCL. And finally, we have Danny. Danny is the BNA's Community and Inclusion Officer. Danny is from a neurobiochemistry and synaptic plasticity background. They work to improve equity, diversity, and inclusion in neuroscience. So today we will learn more about the roles Danny has held leading to their community and inclusion role, and how their work experience had helped them in their current role. So those are our 3 panelists, and you'll see them in just a second. But yeah, don't forget, guys, questions, put them in the Q&A box and we'll get to them mainly at the end. So I'm just going to hand back over to our founders of SiSTEM and our panel.
Hello, everyone, again. So yes, we have, as Amber said, we have 3 amazing panelists, and we're just going to hear about their journeys and just talk about how they got to where they got to. So we hope that you find this helpful. So thank you so much. I'm just going to okay, so first of all, let's just introduce ourselves to everyone once again. So we can start with you, Dr. Bernie, as you're first on my screen. Please just let everybody know once again who you are, and just say hi to everyone, please.
Hi everyone, thank you to SiSTEM for having me on this webinar. It's a pleasure. So my name is Bernie and I am a neuroscientist. So my current research is focused on developing gene therapies for pediatric neurological diseases. So I have a background of neuroscience. I did my undergrad in neuroscience, did my master's in neuroscience, and then did a PhD in neuroscience. So I've pretty much been in this field. So that's where I'm at right now. And my main aim is to be able to develop new therapies for incurable diseases. So this is the field I feel like I'll be sticking with for a long while. So thank you again for having me, and nice to see you all virtually today.
Thank you so much for coming as well. And Dr. Anne, please let us know who you are as well.
Hi, again, thank you so much for having us on. We're looking forward to the discussion this evening. Also, apologies for giving you such a tongue twister in the introduction. It was it's always a difficult one to say. So yes, I'm Anne Cook. I've also been in neuroscience quite a long time, but not in research. I've spent most of my career doing this thing called science administration, which I'm really excited to talk to you about. I think it offers an awful lot of opportunities to really stay in science and work in science without necessarily working at the research bench. So I'm looking forward to sharing some of that with you.
Thank you so much. And Danny as well, also from the BNA, can you let us know who you are?
Sure. Yeah, my name's Danny Singer. I am, as my Zoom name says, the Community and Inclusion Officer at the BNA, which means, among other things, I kind of head up managing the BNA Scholars Program, which some of you might have heard about. My background is a little bit more messy, which might be a relief to hear for some of you guys who have been wondering about career paths and things like that. It doesn't have to be straightforward. I've been in, out, shake it all about, and then finally back into neuroscience, and have had a really fun journey doing it. So looking forward to talking a bit more about that when we get onto the Q&A.
Thank you. Thank you. We're so excited to have all of you join our panel today. And yeah, we're really looking forward to this discussion. So first of all, let's just start off. We'll start off with the BNA. So first of all, maybe, Anne, you can let us know what is the BNA and how does it help neuroscientists, or how does it help your members?
Sure. So the BNA, as you said in the introduction, we essentially promote and support neuroscience and neuroscientists. The largest UK-based organisation to do that, and we've been running for over 50 years now, so well established in the research landscape. We've got nearly 3,000 members. It's a wonderful community. It's got such a variety of people. Everybody's united by an interest in the nervous system. But it's definitely a major perk of my job is getting to interact with all our members every day. The way that we support both neuroscience and neuroscientists covers, gosh, an awful lot of things. So we work at kind of sector level to promote the discipline and to support the discipline. That it can include facilitating ways for academia and industry to work together more effectively and really kind of power forward that translational neuroscience aspect. We advocate for neuroscience and champion neuroscience at many levels, including national and international. Advocating for funding is obviously a big one, but also facilitating regulations and the ability for neuroscientists to still collaborate with other countries despite things like Brexit. And then I suppose going to the more individual level of how we support individuals within our membership, we have things like bursaries and grants, which a lot of societies have. Some of them, I think, are a little bit different, like we have a carer grant scheme, for instance, to support people with care and responsibilities of any need, of any sort, to participate in neuroscience. We have the Scholars Programme, which Dennis already mentioned, which is specifically for underrepresented ethnic groups in neuroscience. We do a lot on careers, actually, so events like today's, but also just generally get inquiries in the office about lots of questions about what neuroscience is, how to get into neuroscience, connections that they can make. So like a whole range of stuff, which I've just kind of touched upon there.
Thank you. And what is science administration as well, since this is the whole focus of today?
So science administration, in summary, is really all the things that go on around the actual research process, which enable research to happen. And there is a really broad range of activities that can include. And a lot of people are actually working in science administration. It's not something that I was aware of at all, really, when I was doing my PhD and was in the lab. I guess you get very focused on your research and don't really notice all the things that are happening around you that enable that to happen. But it might be a tech transfer office. It might be working to run an institute. It could be in communications. It could be in policy. publishing, science writing, really kind of a whole range of jobs that you can look at. If you go and look at, let's say, the Royal Society and the kind of jobs that they have, or UKRI, UK Research Institutes, there'll be, you know, lots of people working there. They're all in this science administration role. I sometimes think it would benefit from a bit of PR, because science administration doesn't sound very interesting. I think it should come up with a better name for it. But I certainly kind of landed in it by accident, and I just think it has a lot to offer.
Yeah, it sounds very interesting, and it sounds, as you said, there's a range of jobs in there, and I hope that today we'll be able to delve into some of the jobs and some of the roles that are involved in it.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna go to Dr. Bernie, and I just want to ask you, why did you decide to initially study neuroscience? And yeah, so what sparked that interest in neuroscience, Dr. Bernie?
Okay, so what sparked that interest? Couple of things. So first of all, I had quite a few people that were close to me, or family members that were being diagnosed with neurological conditions. And for their scenario, there was no cure. So for a lot of neurological conditions, once you get diagnosed, you can just really manage the symptoms, and you just watch like your family members and patients decline. So that was something that, because I was already interested in like medicine, but in particular neuroscience, that was one of the key things. And then I also read a book by Susan Greenfield as well. So I think a combination of that made me realize that, you know, the brain is really interesting, even though we know more than we did before. It's like we still don't know. So there's always more to know. So I thought this is a great field for me to get into. So that there's a combination of those two things that got me into the field. Okay.
And what are you currently researching right now?
So currently I'm involved in developing gene therapy. So there are a lot of neurological conditions with a genetic basis. So it could be the mutation causes a particular protein to not be expressed, which then results in neurons being damaged, or particular functions in the brain that can't be carried out. So developing these therapies where you can replace the gene, or you might have a protein being expressed that can have harmful effects on neurons. So maybe cause a decrease in that protein. So that's what my current work is focused on.
Amazing.
And did you know, when you were doing, like, you know, an undergrad in neuroscience, did you know that you wanted to be a researcher, or was it something that happened as you went on during your education?
So initially, so when I first did, at the end of my master's, I was still, no, at the end of my BSc, I was still confused as to what I wanted to do. So I felt like, okay, maybe if I study more, then I can figure it out. Because again, neuroscience is so broad, you can do anything, as we've learned of. But I think when I did my master's and I did my research project with my master's, that's what made me realize, okay, I actually want to do this. So during my master's, that's when I decided to apply for a PhD. So it was really my master's and that experience. I had a great mentor and a supervisor. And I think that's what made me think, okay, I actually want to do this long term. So it was doing that, having that project, because I think lab during your undergrad is quite, for me, it was hard to piece it together. You're just in week by week. It's hard to, you have all these concepts. It's hard to see how it meshes together. But having that year of doing hardcore research put it together for me, and it made me decide that I actually want to continue doing this.
And then continue doing it even after you finish your PhD, because a lot of people, once they finish their PhD, they don't want to see a lab in their life again. But yeah, you continued. What made you continue staying in doing lab work?
For me, I think because my passion is to develop new drugs for incurable diseases, that's always my passion. And even though, you know, as we'll probably discuss later, PhD is not easy, but because that is my end goal, it's still driven me to continue to do this. I know it's not something that I'm going to click my fingers and it's going to happen, but I still have that passion and that drive to stick with research for now. So it really still excites me, it interests me. I feel like you can use your own ideas, try out experiments and see how it goes. So for me, I have a very busy brain. It's the career path for me that keeps me active and keeps me stimulated, always learning new things. So I think that's what made me continue. That's why I'm still in research at the moment.
Thank you so much. We'll come back to you in a minute and talk more about your PhD and also your research. So I'm going to move on to Danny. So Danny, you was biochemistry, if I'm correct.
Originally, yeah.
Yeah, that's your background. So how did you land into your current role right now?
Well, as I kind of alluded to earlier, by a very meandering route. So I studied biochemistry because I was interested in the way that things worked. I was really interested in like the mechanistic details of things like that. And I didn't really have any particular interest beyond that kind of general scientific curiosity at the time when I started studying my undergraduate degree. But as I continued through it, and I ended up for my dissertation studying in a lab synaptic plasticity, so the way that interactions between neurons strengthen or weaken depending on their use and experience. And I had been in a lot of my spare time doing a lot of research into different aspects of continental philosophy as well. And I became really, really excited by the idea of culture and sort of ideology and how that interacts with the body and particularly the brain. Because obviously, like, science nowadays is more and more becoming accustomed to the idea that nature and nurture are not kind of strictly separate kind of influences on a person, and they're very much interwoven. So it's how that interweaving actually works in practice was what I was really interested in. So I went away and did a whole host of other careers that kind of approached that question from different angles. So I worked in early years childcare for a long time, working with special educational needs children, and did some research in setting with those children, learning about how educational practice how it works. I then moved into trade union organizing and community union organizing, and again the idea of kind of like supporting people through kind of counseling relationships and how that kind of therapeutic relationship works in practice. And I still kind of study all of those things in my spare time, but have now come back into wanting to actually like more concretely support neuroscience research. And that's how I got back involved in the BNA. So yeah, a very meandering route, but that still kind of defines the boundaries of what my role within the BNA is. It's like, as Anne kind of described very eloquently earlier, within science administration as a whole, supporting research to happen. But B, more specifically, with my work with the BNA Scholars Programme, as Anne also mentioned, specifically supporting people in like kind of helping relationships, basically, to do things that they may not ordinarily have been able to do because of certain other barriers and circumstances. So yeah, that's how I got here.
And then what is your so what's your typical day looking like in your role? Because your role sounds well, it sounds very interesting, but what does a community and diversity inclusion officer actually do?
A whole host of things. It's a really diverse role. So we at the BNA are a very small team, which means that by the nature of that, we have to take on a lot of different roles and duties that might not be easily captured by a snappy job title. So I do a whole host of kind of administrative things that have to do with kind of the bursaries and the grant funding that Anne mentioned earlier, up to kind of more glamorous things like the BNA Scholars Programme, arranging relationships with organisations that support the Scholars Programme financially, and also by offering career development opportunities to our scholars, making those opportunities happen in practice. I also have a fairly big role supporting our local groups coordinator, who's a member of our counselling committee, who, as the name suggests, coordinates groups of local BNA members in different institutions around the country. So these like groups of neuroscientists based in such and such university, they might want to put on an event for neuroscientists there to support their career development, to support them to interact with one another and collaborate and build relationships. So the BNA can facilitate that through funding and also through the actual structures of these local groups. So it allows them to kind of communicate with one another and also between local groups. So every year we have a big local groups forum in a different city around the country where all representatives from around the country all come to meet together. So that's a really exciting part of my role that I really love doing, is as my job title suggests, like supporting the community of neuroscientists to really grow and thrive. I also kind of tangentially involved in some of the policy and advocacy stuff that the BNA does, which Anne also mentioned earlier. We'll probably get onto this a bit later, but we've got a really exciting event coming up in April called our International Festival of Neuroscience, and I'll be helping run a part of that, all about policy and advocacy. So how the BNA supports change in, might be even as big as like changes in perspectives and positions of central government, by we might provide evidence to different government bodies to support what our neuroscience community wants for neuroscience. So something that we're pushing for at the moment is for a greening of neuroscience. We're aware that neuroscience can be not the most kind of environmentally friendly, well, as is any industry, and we're always looking for ways that we can encourage neuroscience to become more green. And that, as we know, with our personal efforts to be environmentally friendly in our daily lives, we can all be doing our best to be environmentally friendly, but it's really change at the kind of government level which is going to really help stuff change. So yeah, that kind of describes the influencing part of the BNA's aims, which is something that a colleague of ours, Joe, heads up, but I do a little bit of on the side as well.
It's interesting. I didn't know that neuroscience was that big, especially like with government and stuff. So I've learned something new today. So my question is for Dr. Anne, and I want to know what your typical day looks like. So just give us a little brief summary of the day, as it does sound like you have a big job on your hands here. So if you could just explain what's your day-to-day activities.
In some ways, you could summarize it quite easily, and that it consists mostly of emails and meetings, but which is probably like quite a lot of jobs today. But obviously the content and what they're actually for varies a lot. So if I had to describe a typical day, it would be like checking my diary, seeing what meetings I've got coming up, or the next day to make sure I'm ready for them, and then answering lots of emails, or having phone calls and meetings with people. But the actual reason for them can vary from like preparing the monthly accounts. It can be like the sort of financial management side of things. It can be like help organizing events. The Festival of Neuroscience, which Denny mentioned, is taking up a lot of energy at the moment. We've got like 200 plus speakers, so that's a lot of people to organize. It could be more of a kind of strategy planning type thing. So part of my job, it's almost like, although we're a charity and society, it's also like running a small business. So it's thinking, well, how are we going to be financially sustainable? What are our strategic aims? How are we going to meet them? So there's sort of project planning side of things on that one. It might be meetings with individual staff. So I routinely meet with each staff member, and also we have some placement students, so it's supervising those students. It's interacting with our council and committee. So our kind of governance structure is that it's a membership organisation, and members get elected to roles. So, president, treasurer, so on. So it's interacting with those. They're all full-time academics. So, we have to be very appreciative that they're giving up their free time, and, we work with them as much as possible to support them, but also, ultimately that's the community that we are working with. So they have a, very important role in that. It could be occasionally, talking to a journalist, or answering questions about something to do with neuroscience. Sometimes we get questions from, the more public engagement side of things, I guess, people wanting to know information, if we can help with that, pointing them towards sources of information. Gosh, I could go on, but yeah, a real kind of hodgepodge. Pretty much anything that the BNA does, then I will be involved in some way.
And what are your, let's say, biggest challenges from when you started your job to now? Like, what has
Oh,
been?
wow. Well, so the start of being chief executive in this now,
The
gosh.
day you said yes.
How long have you got? So I've been in the role about 7.5 years now. It has changed a lot. I mean, actually, one of the challenges is actually, although it's the same job and the same job title, the nature of the job has changed immensely from when I started. So in a way, it's almost keeping up with it. So when I first started in the role, I had, there was myself and there was one member of staff who worked half-time. So we were very kind of, it wasn't really a staff as such, we just worked together. And I knew this person even before I started in the role. The team has since grown and people have come and gone. So we now have 6 staff members and 2 students. So it's like we've adapted into this still small team, but much more of a sort of organization, the staff, and working out, you know, how to make that work effectively, putting systems in place. Because when you're on your own, you're working with one other person, you almost don't need to tell each other things, you just know. I mean, maybe the 2 of you working with SiSTEM, you could kind of know what's happening. When you've got more people, you have to put systems in place to make sure everybody's aware, everybody knows what's coming up, everybody's kind of feeling happy and is you know, confident in what they're doing. So one of the biggest challenges has actually been growing that staff team. Alongside that, I've already alluded to, it is a bit like running a small business. We need to generate income to sustain ourselves. And that has been challenging. I'm glad to say that we've been successful and we've now kind of diversified our income, so we're in a nice position for that. I think on a larger scale, I think it has been challenging. I mentioned it earlier slightly flippantly, but I think Brexit has really been a huge challenge to the neuroscience community, to all the science community, and it has made things slightly, you know, difficult. We work very closely. There's a wonderful European organisation, neuroscience organisation, FENS, Federation of European Neuroscience Societies, which is not an EU organisation. So directly, it's not impacted by not being in the EU. But I would say the relationships, it just makes things more difficult now. Of sitting in a FENS meeting and knowing that, not in any nasty way, because they're all lovely people and lovely friends, they want to work with the UK, but there are barriers in place now. So that's been quite a challenge too. And of course, you know, the pandemic is a challenge for everybody. So I guess those are some specific challenges to the BNA and some external challenges which have impacted us.
I think that's interesting. One thing I picked up is when you said you put systems in place, because that's something I'm learning, because before it was just me and Abigail on the team. And just because we've known each other from, like, I don't know, birth for me. So when I'm doing something, I don't really need to say it. But when we started working with other people, I realized that they don't have that same connection, because obviously they don't know me, they don't really know the vision of SiSTEM. So you kind of have to put it out plain. And I think that is kind of a skill as a leader, to be able to give someone your vision and let them also build on it as well. So that is what you said there.
Yeah, you summarise that really well. It's about sharing the vision, but without cramping somebody's own individuality and their own kind of creativity. And I don't know, I'm aware that Danny's on the call and they might disagree with me. I mean, hopefully I get it about right, but I don't know.
Well, so we're going to now go back to Dr. Bernie, and we'll come back again because I do want to ask some more, especially about leadership to you. And so Dr. Bernie, please let us know, does a postdoc differ from when you're doing your PhD?
Okay, so I think there's a lot more responsibility at the postdoc level. So before, like, if an email would go out, I'll be like hidden in the chain of emails, but now the email will come directly to me. So like you have to answer to that problem. So I think that was a big thing. When you're a student, you're like, okay, your main focus is the project, but then as a postdoc, you have to start thinking more about funding as well. So applying for grants. So when you have a PhD, you have a certain amount of money coming in, so you're sorted. But now when you're a postdoc, you need to start, usually as a PhD, the project is more or less outlined. for you. And then as you're doing the project, maybe you can add some things, but as a postdoc, you're expected more to think for yourself and generate ideas and apply for funding. So that was something new. So grant writing. So during this year, well, last year, I did apply for a grant. So that was new. So grant writing, a lot of responsibility, and also you're in a lot more meetings as well. You have to like also look for collaborations as well. So not just working by yourself. So it's caused me to network more and meet different people and learn a lot more different techniques as well. So when you do come up with ideas, sometimes you may have to use different techniques to study that. So also reaching out to different maybe departments that have a microscope you don't have, or different machines you don't have. So as well, so it's forced me, before you can probably just hide behind a supervisor and they'll contact, but now it's like you have to be active, what's available around UCL, who can I contact? So that's that responsibility as well. And also thinking about money. So you don't really have to worry about that during a PhD, but as a postdoc for your career progression as well, is really important to be able to write grants, because essentially you have to, the grants will fund your salary and fund your research. So I think that's the big jump as well. Something to think about more when you're a postdoc that you don't have to really consider when you're a PhD student. Yeah.
And as you said, like, grant writing and things. So these are like new skills that you're acquiring. Where do you think you learned most of your skills that you use today in your job?
I think I got a lot of skills during the PhD. I think to be a scientist, one thing, you need a lot of tenacity. And you need to be self-motivated. So during those 4 years of my PhD, it wasn't easy, but it helped me to develop those skills, like being independent as well and problem solving, because you have a plan on paper and many times you go to the lab, it doesn't work. So problem solving was definitely a big skill I learned from my PhD. Communicating, even being on here, being able to talk to everyone. So I had to, for my unit, every few months we had a rotation where you would have to do a presentation, so present your research, present your data, which I think is really good as well. With some of the projects I've worked on, we have collaborations with like pharmaceutical companies, so being able to present your work to like a group of people as well. So that's definitely one of the skills I got from my PhD. And technical skills, so different molecular biology techniques as well. Some teaching opportunities, so having masters and undergraduate students come in the summer, and then also having to train them on techniques as well. So I think the PhD, like during that 4-year period, it helped me a lot, and then I can then use that within the postdoc. So grant writing, well, writing the thesis, there's a lot of writing, so that also helps. But I think with grant writing as well, so this is a new skill. So when you're writing a thesis, it's very technical, using all the big scientific words. But when you write a grant, so as part of my grant application process, I had to summarize my work in 2 minutes. I had to do a 2-minute presentation to stakeholders, to people that own companies. So it's also being able to bring that complicated research in 2 minutes, being able to convince people you should fund my work. So selling yourself is something that I've had to learn. Is really easy. I'm used to presenting data, but to kind of convince people, okay, this is my work, please fund me, that's something I've had to learn during the postdoc. So yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because a lot of times, like, I remember before I did my PhD, I used to think that I needed to be this ready-made scientist before I can apply for a PhD. And that's where I feel like it was a misconception that I had that was completely wrong. Because then once you do a PhD, you realize that it's actually a learning ground, and that's where you're meant to come and learn and things. And as you're saying, that's where you learn most of your skills. So could you tell us maybe something that, well, you probably have a million things, but something that you wish you knew before, very early on, when you were like maybe in your undergrad stage or even in your master's level?
Something that I wish I knew going into about the PhD?
Yes, and about your career in general.
It's not as easy as it seems. I think it's easy to come and talk to you about my research, but being a scientist is not easy. I don't know, I think there was a time ago, I think it was some physics research, there was a breakthrough, and someone on the news literally like came on, I've been doing this for 15 years, and you're just like, why would you be doing that for 15 years? But now I understand why you would be doing that for 15 years. It is a long road, especially in drug development and discovery. It can take 15 to 20 years of work for that work to see the light of day. So I wish I knew just how long the journey will be. But as I said, like, if you have to be passionate about it, because it's not an easy road to take. As you already know, a lot of people drop off after PhD. So going into academia, you need to be self-motivated. It's something that you want to do because it is a long road. So yeah, it's not as easy as it seems, but it's not impossible, and it can be really rewarding.
Wow. But I think what I'm picking up from here is that your hard work really does show. And even if it's like in 10 years time, you're doing breakthroughs for the next generation. I think that is something that would even make you want to wake up every morning knowing that you're going to help somebody. So that's an amazing thing. And yeah, happy for you. Because yeah, you're really changing the medical world. And yeah, so the next question I have is for Danny. And how does your educational background help you in your day-to-day activities of your current role?
Oh, that's an interesting question. So I guess the obvious thing to say is that the vast majority of my day-to-day job involves interacting with neuroscientists, and I need to know, if I were a total layperson who had no experience of neuroscience, it would be very difficult for me to know how best to support people to make the most of their research and to develop their careers. There are many things that I have zero to some expertise in when it comes to neuroscience, but I have a cursory understanding of a lot of things, so I can know at least if a scholar, for example, comes to me with a question, I can, if it's not something that I have to defer to Anne, I can refer that scholar on to somebody who, or something which might kind of further their interest, because I have that understanding. Additionally, I have experience of like having gone through like an undergraduate degree and like the hell that is applying for postgraduate stuff as well. And that's precisely the career stage that quite a few of our scholars are at. And indeed, like the majority of the BNA's members. So currently, like I think it's around 2/3 of the BNA's membership is made up of undergraduate and postgraduate students. So being able to relate to them not only helps you kind of know appropriate ways to support them and come up with like ideas that might be useful further down the line to support them even better as an organization, but it also helps you kind of actually be able to kind of like concretely answer queries that people have. So yeah, it kind of, my educational experience kind of helps me in quite an indirect way, I think. Also, and this is something that I think is like perhaps not talked about a huge deal, but like, and this is maybe a controversial thing to say, but I think like some of the most important things that I got out of my undergraduate degree were not actually the specific pieces of scientific knowledge and like skills, but were actually the other skills that you learn as you're developing as a student. You learn like self-organization, you learn writing skills, you learn a lot of like people skills as well, and those are applicable not only to my job but to pretty much any job that you will go on and do in your future career, and you will always find ways to apply those. Something that I've like come to understand recently, and this kind of harks back to what I was saying before about my meandering like career path, is that there will always be things from every stage of your career, educational or employment wise, that you can apply to the next thing that you do. And it's just a matter of like trying to like figure out what those ways are, because like all of your experiences are valuable and all of the things that you learned are useful and transferable.
Yeah, I love what you just said there, because that's something I learned from my degree as well. During my degree, it was really hard, and the content was nice. I liked it, but the thing I really liked was making posters. And weirdly, during the year, I had to make about 5 posters, and every poster I did, it was always like the best in the class. And I realized that other engineers didn't really know how to make the information look good. They had all the great information, but nobody would look at their posters because they were using like colors that clashed. So that's why I kind of picked up like, oh, I might be good at, communicating science. So it's actually really interesting that while you're at uni, as much as you're learning the information, you're also gaining other skills and building yourself as a person. So another question I had for you is, if you didn't have the science background, what advice would you give to someone who wants to do science administration?
So I mean, there are certainly people within our team who don't have a science background, so it's not a necessity. But I think having, as I kind of said earlier, having some familiarity with neuroscience, if you want to get into the neuroscience side of science administration, or whatever other part takes your fancy, having some familiarity with it I think would be useful. So same as would go for trying to get into any other part of a scientific career, would be to try and get some experience of what that sector looks like, what the problems are that the sector faces, and that the people involved in it face, and the typical kind of organizations and big players that exist in that sector as well. I think probably everybody on this call is probably on their way to doing that anyway. But yeah, it only needs to be like a very cursory thing to be involved in the sector at all. It obviously, like as Anne said earlier, the science administration sector is enormous and really, really diverse. If you wanted to go into something that was like way more closely linked to the actual practice of research scientists, then you probably would need a much more kind of in-depth affinity with the matters of research science. But to get into a job like mine, for example, that's not really a requirement. It certainly helps, as I kind of mentioned a minute ago, but it's not a requirement. So I think, to properly answer your question, I think you'd probably have to answer it 100 different times for the different jobs that exist within the sector. But generally, I wouldn't get too worried about it.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting, and I just love the fact that you went, you come from a science background, but then it's now opened another door and another avenue, and it's something that we're passionate about as well, is just trying to expose those other avenues that are not the traditional routes. And yeah, this is just one pure example of that. You may study one thing, but you can use your skills in something completely different. So I'm just going to move on now to Anne, and I have a question. Just you have a PhD. What point of your career did you feel that you will be a chief executive? And did you know that was a career, that option, whilst you were studying?
Absolutely not. No way. I'm still not quite sure how I ended up as chief executive, to be honest. I suppose, there's kind of 2 parts to answering that. One is actually deciding that I wasn't going to stay in academia as an academic research scientist. And then the other side is, well, why did I end up doing this, and how, what then became chief executive? The step out of academia, it's very much both sort of negatives and positives. The negatives were, when I went to start a PhD, I really didn't know what a science career was. I kind of had an idea of what science was, and I wanted to really use what I'd learned so far and apply that and do research, which was actually original research, not just kind of an undergraduate project in a lab. But I wasn't aware of some of the things that Bernie's referred to, like, applying for grants and being part of the kind of greater science structure. And I just it felt like, I'm not sure this is entirely true, but at the time it felt like the only route in science was to, have this burning ambition to become a professor and run your own lab. And I just thought, I'm not sure that's for me. So that was a bit of a kind of negative push. But I guess on the positive side of things, I also felt like I could use other skills that maybe I wasn't doing as a scientist, like making posters. I mean, I really relate to what you say. I kind of, things that you don't necessarily use. I really enjoy doing public engagement, for instance, and getting involved in that side of things. Talking with people, getting them to work together, really, things that weren't being exercised by sitting at a microscope all day. So that kind of took me out into doing this more kind of research administration, not that I actually knew that was what it was at the time. And no, I've never had a career plan. I still don't have a career plan. It's just been a case of, opportunities come or they don't come, and some doors you go through and some doors you don't. And you kind of end up here. I mean, having said that, I feel like extremely lucky that I've had the chance to do this job. It does feel like, it's almost all my tick boxes ticked at the same time, but I never really planned on it. So yeah, I'm not sure if that answers the question.
I think it does, because a lot of the times people land in their roles unexpectedly, and I think that's the beauty of of life, that you don't really plan where you're going, but then that even we always say, like 10 years ago probably certain jobs didn't exist, and every day is always evolving. So yeah, that's a very interesting point you've made. Also, I mean, we at SiSTEM, we're all about, female empowerment. We're all about, increasing diversity and inclusion. As a female chief executive, do you think being a female gives you some advantage in the role?
It's an interesting one. Funnily enough, in this sector, there are quite a lot of senior management are held by women. Now, I don't know whether, when I say the sector, I'm looking again at that kind of science administration role. So chief executives, had a quick look before today's meeting actually. So Physiological Society, the Pharmacology Society, the chief executive of UKRI, the anaesthetist. There are a lot of like senior management positions held by women. So it's a strange phenomenon. I'm not quite sure why. You could hypothesize why. I don't know what the answer is. I think it's a fantastic thing. I think that women have an awful lot to offer, and why shouldn't they be in those senior positions and really driving things forward and making decisions. One of my roles, my previous roles, was in BREMA, which is the British Anaesthetic and Respiratory Equipment Manufacturers Association, which is an awful name. Now that was slightly outside of the sector, and that was more male dominated. And it's interesting, I was looking back on, so I ran Bristol Neuroscience for 10 years, and it only recently occurred to me that throughout that time, there was a different director, like a director of Bristol Neuroscience every year, and only one of them was a woman through my time. And it hadn't even occurred to me. I never even thought about it until literally maybe like 6 months ago, a year ago. Whereas now I'd be so much more aware of it. So I don't know, I'm not sure I'm really answering the question very well, but I think, I think that women have a place at the table as much as anybody else. I think it's actually quite a good sector to do it in, because you don't feel like the only one in the room, and that has been the case. When I worked with BREMA, the Anaesthetic Association, it was more, I felt like very much in the minority. But I think it definitely still, we've changed. Look at Bristol Neuroscience 10 years ago, one woman during those 10 years. And now I think people are much more aware. There is much more of a drive to address inequities, but I still think we've got a long way to go as well. So I kind of whole mixture of answers to that one.
And I also want to just ask you the same question I asked Bernie, just about where did you think you learned most of your skills?
I think the PhD was absolutely essential actually for me. Even though I didn't work for that long in a lab, I did a short postdoc. It's like Danny said, actually, the skills that you learn doing that chiefly amongst them was project management, essential project management, which you apply to pretty much everything. The ability to take on a challenge, a problem, a task, and break it down into how are you going to meet that task. So, you know, if you're running an experiment, you need reagents for it. So when do I need to order those reagents? When do I need to, you know, make sure that the lab space is ready? So when you're a PhD and you're working much more independently than, say, as an undergraduate, and you learn those skills, you're taught those skills. I think that's one of the chief things about doing a PhD. Now, that's not to say that you can't learn those skills doing other things. So it's not like everyone has to do a PhD, but I think that's something hugely valuable that you take away with you after having done one. You've got the time management, you've got the project management, you've got the ability to solve problems. If you can't solve it, you go and ask somebody else, you kind of think around the problem. And I've used those for pretty much everything, I think, and still do on a daily basis.
That's really interesting. So a PhD is very essential, and well, I would say that, but yeah, no, I feel that a lot of the times when we're doing things like, you know, lab work, or even at university and stuff, we do sometimes feel like, why am I doing this? But this is really showing that everything that we do is not wasted. And you know, we do pick up really important skills, especially those soft skills that, you know, they don't actually teach you. No one actually teaches you, you just have to learn it. Yeah, I'm just really yeah, this has been really inspiring, and I'm aware of the time, so what I'm going to do is I think we're going to pass over to Amber to get some questions from the audience, and then if we can also chip in some of the questions that we do have left here.
Lovely, thank you. And thank you to all the panelists. Even from my perspective, I'm not in science, guys. I'm on the tech side. I work in ad tech, and even hearing like Dr. Anne about how like you've got good diversity in your industry, for me was quite like eye-opening, because in where I work in corporate, our senior leadership is all male. So it's nice to know that this is like the direction that everything's heading in. But yeah, thank you to all our panelists. We've got questions for all of you in our chat box. So we've got, thank you, panelists. A question for Bernie. I'm a recent UCL graduate, so it's good to hear your research. How was the process of applying for a PhD as a master's student? So yeah, we'll start with that one.
So actually, I found my PhD on findaphd.com. So there's that. So it has all the PhDs around there. And just look out for like the Wellcome Trust. So mine was an MRC funded PhD. Also, if you have in mind the kind of research you want to do, like a lot of my colleagues put adverts on Twitter. So just follow some of the UCL academics, and they literally post PhD positions on Twitter. So I feel like there are a lot of positions out there. It's just finding them. So findaphd.com, and definitely Twitter. Like there are so many, even this week alone, I've seen so many PhD, they're funded as well. So yeah, and always feel free to reach out to me on Twitter or LinkedIn if you need any more guidance. I can push you in the direction.
Perfect. Thank you, Bernie. So yeah, literally, guys, and everyone, we've got social media for a reason. So let's use it to our advantage. I've got a question for Anna and also for Danny. Can the BNA help graduate students with getting into publication? I don't have any, and wonder if this will impact my CV to stay in academia. Also, can one stay in academia but also work in science administration? It's a sort of two-part question there.
Danny, do you want me to take them, or you?
Shall I do the first half?
Yeah.
So to answer the writing question, absolutely, the BNA has a bunch of different opportunities actually. The kind of most high profile one being the journal that we run. So that's one thing we've not mentioned yet. We have a journal called Brain and Neuroscience Advances, which cunningly also abbreviates to BNA. Kudos to Anne for that one. That journal is published by Sage, and we're trying to pioneer a kind of what's called a credible approach to neuroscience publishing, which is another kind of policy aim of the BNA, promoting credibility. We'll talk about that in a bit more detail later if we have time, maybe. But all kinds of reports, as well as kind of research reports, we try and encourage to be published. So reviews, something called registered reports, where kind of things are published pre the kind of final kind of paper publishing, and other things which are like surprisingly quite accessible to students who may not be at kind of those far end like parts of their careers, that are much more easily amenable to kind of publishing. If kind of publishing a journal seems a bit kind of far-fetched for you at the moment, then there are kind of smaller scale opportunities that we also have. So we have people that are BNA members and send in articles, for example, like book reviews and things like that, that we sometimes publish on our website. That's like a real entry level thing that anybody can do. And we also have every not every quarter, what's the word for 3 times a year, termly publication called the BNA Bulletin, which contains it's a formal like publication, but has a variety of different kind of lengths of piece within it. So there are some publications by undergraduate students, there are some publications by students of other different levels, and also kind of shorter articles by more high profile academics on their research perhaps, or on just topics that are interesting to them. So if you would like to be involved in something like that and you join the BNA as a member, then if you email me at the BNA office, I can connect you to our student editors at the BNA Bulletin, who will be able to support you to put something together for that. So yeah, lots of different things that we have available.
Sounds good. And Dr. Anne as well.
To add to that, the things that Dan has already mentioned, I think one article format that's particularly good for students in our journal, Brain Neuroscience Advances, is the short reports. So they're well suited to a student project because, as the name implies, they're quite short. You've asked if that will impact your CV today in academia. It sounds like you're a recent undergraduate graduate. Congratulations. I would say, at that stage, no. I mean, I don't know. I definitely didn't have many publications as undergraduate. I think that would be quite unusual. Another way to start getting publications is to present posters, of course. I know we keep talking about it, but it's about to happen at our festival. If you present a poster, your poster abstract will be published in the journal, and then you can refer to that. That will be the beginnings of a publication record. But I wouldn't be discouraged, certainly at this stage, if you haven't got publications. Amber, shall I go on to reply to the last bit as well? Yeah. So the question around, can one stay in academia but also work in science administration? I think, and to be honest, I think it'd be very hard to be an academic scientist alongside holding a science admin role. As Bernie's alluded to, I think it takes a lot of dedication and passion and time to be a full-time, to be a scientist. However, I mean, I don't know, what your situation is exactly, but you might want to consider being a research technician. Sometimes, again, another sort of overlooked area of working in science is a lovely phrase, technicians make it happen, and they really do. So research technicians, and they often have roles alongside working in the lab and doing research. They may well be involved in the running of the lab or in the institution, or have other kinds of roles alongside that, but might be of interest to you if you're interested in that more kind of administration side too. So I think there would be possibilities, but I think to do academia in addition to science administration would be challenging.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And then we've also got, I'm currently applying for medical communications / science administration jobs. Does only having a bachelor's degree versus having a master's or PhD put me at a disadvantage?
Shall I carry on with that one as well? Yeah. So especially because, you know, we've appointed a number of people over the years at the BNA. I would say we always probably have it on the job advert that it's useful to have a science degree. It depends on the role, but I would say I can't think of anything where we specified you have to have a master's or a PhD. When it comes to communications, it's very much around experience and ability. So to me, if I were appointing someone for that role, I'd like to see what they've done. You know, writing for the BNA bulletin, for instance, would be probably far more valuable. Sending an example of a blog post that you've done, or an understanding of social media and how to communicate with people. So if that's what you're interested in, I would definitely think around, you know, what does an employer want to see evidence of? If you're going for a communications role, they want to see evidence of your being able to communicate, rather than maybe able to, I don't know, titrate an acid base on a in a PhD lab. So it's definitely useful. We've already talked about all the skills that you learn doing a higher degree, but it's definitely not essential either.
Perfect. So yeah, just experience often a lot of the time is going to sort of supersede like your degrees and stuff like that. So in answer to that, so thank you. And then we've also got, what advice would you give to someone wanting to break into this field?
Should I take that one as well?
And scream into answer this one.
Assuming the field is science administration, I think it's the kind of extracurricular stuff. When I applied for my first job, which was in science administration, and I was doing a postdoc in a lab, I saw the job advertised. I thought, there's no way I'm going to get this, but I'll apply anyway because it's the kind of thing I want to do, and I'll have the experience of the interview and all the rest of it. So I had very little experience. I said, from being a postdoc into something completely different. But it was, I think what was really, really valuable in that was being able to talk about the public engagement stuff I'd done, that I'd organised an event, that I was interested in websites, which were, this sounds awful, but they were kind of new at the time. Danny laughing away. So it was being able to point to things that I'd done outside of my day job. So I think if you're looking to get into this field, you know, follow your interests, because ultimately you want to end up with a role that you're really interested in. But if it's writing, do writing. If it's communications, do communications. If it's in policy, then get involved in an advocacy event. And that will really kind of then give you a step into being able to do a good application and have a good interview.
Perfect, thank you. And then just we've got another one. So let's go for, again, Dr. Anne and Danny. Does the BNA have any flexible paid roles for neuroscience postgraduates? So for those who are on the fence about academia or industry.
Shall I answer that, Danny?
I think you're probably best placed to, yeah.
Okay, I feel like I'm hogging the conversation. We don't, as Danny's alluded, we're a very small team. We have 6 members of staff, so it's not like we have a constant kind of recruitment going on. Occasionally we do have roles coming up, and I would say that some of those roles are perfect for somebody like that. We have had a few different people over the years who have come straight from a PhD, and aren't quite sure which direction they want to go in. And I do think actually having a role with the BNA is perfect, because it gives you the chance to explore some options, to get some experience outside of research. And of those individuals, I know one of whom has stayed in science administration, has got now a kind of really cool communications job. Somebody else who's gone back more into the research side of things because they felt that they really wanted to actually, you know, they missed the academic research, so they've gone back into it. So I think we do, but it just depends if a role becomes available, if a vacancy becomes available.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then off the back of that, are there any internships or placement opportunities available in BNA?
Yes, in actual fact, the kind of deadline for applying to our current round of placements is looming. We're about to, well, it's not a deadline per se, but we're about to make a selection of who our next placement students will be. So every now and again, we take on some placement students. We currently have 2 who are fantastic, and we try and give them many different experiences and opportunities within the BNA as possible, so that they can really build these soft skills that we were talking about earlier, but also get a real concrete understanding experience of what it is like working in this kind of sector. Those students range from being undergrads up to quite a bit higher sometimes. So it really depends who you are, what you'd like to do, and how much time you have to give. I think the shortest period we've offered before for a placement student is 3 months. Is that right, Anne?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Some stay with us for up to a year. So yeah, there's a variety of different things available. It really comes down to what you'd like to do and what you've got to give, basically, and what your university will allow you to do. So if you'd like to get involved in that, there's still the opportunity to apply, and you can do that via the BNA website. If you go onto the careers section of the website, you can look at the job description for placement students. And yeah, we'll be making the selections for that in the next couple of weeks. So if you are interested, do that ASAP. But otherwise, there'll be other rounds coming up in the future.
Perfect. Thank you, Danny. So yeah, if anyone's looking for opportunities, then get applying now. In the interest of time, I think we're at time now. So actually, we've got one last question. Maybe Bernie, I don't know if you want to answer this one. How did you deal with any setbacks that you've had during your career so far?
So I'll say my setbacks will be in terms of actually bench-wise. So when you plan an experiment and things don't go to plan, and one of 2 things. So I'd have to maybe redesign the experiment and go a different route, or reach out to other colleagues and find out if they've had the same problem, and see if I can get tips from there. Sometimes I might have to try different reagents. So the long and short is to not allow the setback to make you stagnant, but to navigate a way out, either by yourself, by talking to other people, redesigning the experiment. So always keep going, but just find different ways to solve the problem. And sometimes it may be you find that that's just not a feasible experiment, so you have to go a completely different route. So yeah. Perfect. So sometimes it's just about redirecting and finding other ways to still get your result. Perfect. Thank you. I think that is all for today. Co-founders, is there anything else you want to wrap up with?
Yes, someone just asked, how do we contact the panelists?
Okay.
So I don't know whether we'll just put up a personal, through LinkedIn. Is that the easiest way to contact you?
Yeah, LinkedIn would be best. Feel free to get in touch.
Or if you'd like to get in touch with the BNA more generally, I head up the kind of primary inbox for that. So you can just email office@bna.org.uk, and I'll try my best to answer any questions you've got about our organisation.
Okay, that's great.
And you can also follow the SiSTEM UK page on LinkedIn, and there you can find everybody's information, because I think we've posted.
Yes,
there,
yes. So you can also find there as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, this has been so great. Yes, thank you all. Thank you, panelists. It's been really eye-opening and very inspiring, and it's been quite, I've just been remembering certain things as you've been talking. And yeah, I think, Amber, I feel that's it from us. We don't have anything, but we're just very encouraged this evening.
Yes, I'm very grateful for everyone that has come and joined our first webinar. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having us, and thank you everyone for coming. It's been fun.
Likewise.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a nice evening.
Thank you.